Good morning to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here. Monday now, the 6th day of May, 2024. And we need to talk about hurricane season. I know we have a high risk out there for severe weather, but that is covered by plenty of other people, I assure you. So we're going to focus on hurricane season because ever since May started, we've gotten a whole bunch of new data, numbers, to crunch, and I want to go over that with you, look at a few tweets from people and kind of interpret what it means and really drive home the point that we must take the upcoming hurricane season very seriously. While we don't know for sure what is going to happen, nobody does. Everything that forms could stay well away from all land masses. That is a non-zero chance. You know, there's always a chance. Remember the meme from Dumb and Dumber? It's true, but mathematically speaking and just looking at everything logically, I don't think that's going to happen. And impacts, I believe, are coming up, and we need to really start thinking about that as we get ready to literally knock on the door of, well, it's going to be knocking on our door, really, of the 2024 hurricane season. All right? Got some big numbers out there from the ECMWF and other guidance. Let's start off. First of all, it is National Hurricane Preparedness Week, so please take it seriously. I will put a link to this in the description of today's video. If you are new, whatever that means, to an area, a year, 2 years, 3 years, maybe in the last 4 years, you remember 4 years ago, today, what was happening? Of course you do. A lot of people moved to areas that were in the south for various reasons. And now they are in the way of hurricanes, especially in Florida. So you might not have a lot of hurricane experience. Although, with Ian in 22 and Idalia last year, a lot of people do have some hurricane experience. But maybe you moved recently in the last year or so, last 6 months, Texas, all the way to Maine. You are in the hurricane zone. You've got to just educate yourself. Take some time. Stop the scrolling of everything else and at least pay attention to what's going on with hurricanes, because I'm telling you, from 30 years of experience, it is a very stressful, very difficult time when you have to deal with one in your area. And I've said this before, weather is the one place in your life that I fully condone you being selfish. I want you to ask yourself, how will this affect me? Because you start with you, and then it spreads out from there, because then you can talk to the rest of your family, your neighbors, your colleagues at work, whatever the case may be. It starts with you first. All right, so ask yourself that. All right, how will this affect me? And the National Hurricane Center, NOAA, National Weather Service offices, different media outlets, and even some of our big companies in this country work towards getting people hurricane prepared. All right, and this is the time. The time to prepare is now. That's what they say, right? National Weather Service, Wilmington, are right here, almost in my backyard. A couple miles from where I live is where the WFO is, out near the airport. The first step is to know your risk. Hurricanes are not just a coastal problem, so find out today what types of water and wind hazards could happen where you live. That is very important. Hurricanes are not just a coastal problem, so check it out. Do you live in a floodplain? Do you live in a storm surge evacuation area? Do you live in a structure that is vulnerable to even 80 or 90 mile per hour wind where you might not feel safe? You have to figure out what is my risk, and then you go from there. So good information from the Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center. I will be working on various videos, we call them Hurricane U for University, over the coming weeks. Even as we get into June, I'm arranging different things. The first one I'm going to record tomorrow with Daniel Brown from the National Hurricane Center, and we're going to talk about, for about an hour, preparedness. What does that mean in 2024? I don't want to just give you the same old song and dance. You got to go get 48 hours worth of canned food and water and some flashlights and a generator. First of all, 48 hours is horse poop, in my opinion. You need to be prepared for at least 5 days. I've seen that. I mean, there's going to be instances where it's going to take a while for help to arrive. So you've got to be self-sufficient for 5 days or more. That's my recommendation. A week is optimal. And people that know the business and that have been through it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm going to be talking with Dan Brown from the National Hurricane Center tomorrow over Zoom, and we're going to discuss what it means to be prepared in 2024. What are some of the new products from the National Hurricane Center? How do you interpret them? And just being ready. You know, what does that mean? Again, we're so busy. We got everything going on. We are algorithm driven. We got to separate that and sometimes just put this algorithm to use and think. That's what my dad used to say. He had a picture when he was in the Army and it said, think. I thought that was brilliant. We do. We got to think for ourselves, and we got to be ready, because the science, it's a gift. It is telling us this. It's coming. All right? We don't know where they're going, but we know they're coming. May 1st, Phil Klotzbach. Also going to talk to him in the coming weeks about, well, why do we even need these forecasts? I'm going to ask him straight up, and he's going to give us some good answers. So, yeah, we got a lot of stuff coming up for you here at HurricaneTrack. May 1st, latest seasonal forecast from the CANsips. That's from the Canadian models. The ensembles, the seasonal forecasting, continues to highlight an extremely hurricane-favorable atmospheric and oceanic conditions at the peak of the hurricane season. Very favorable overall. There's the sea surface temperature profile as an example. This is what the precip pattern looks like, and as you can see, it's aimed towards where we live. We don't have all this green just stacked up out in the ocean. Doesn't mean we won't have recurving storms. Of course we will. But this is a general look at the precip pattern, the anomalies, and it's aimed where we live, west of 60 degrees longitude over here, right? And even the Cape Verde Islands could be in peril. The Azores, even our friends up here in northwest Europe, the UK, Ireland vicinity, Atlantic Canada, they may not all be painted in green. This is the densest area of anomalies through here, but that's what we're seeing from the guidance. This is not a person. This is not so-and-so's webpage. This is what they think. This is what the guidance is showing us, the science, right? So that was from May 1st. We move along. Yesterday, the hammer dropped from the ECMWF, and this was very, very eye-opening. Phil tweeting that the ECMWF calls for an extremely busy Atlantic hurricane season, and this is ridiculous. With 23 named storms, so we would officially exhaust the list of 21 storms, 13 hurricanes, and an accumulated cyclone energy, the ACE score, 200% of normal. In other words, about 250 total ACE points. Why is that important? Accumulated cyclone energy tells us the quality of the storms. We're seeing the quantity in there, lots of them, but how strong will they be and how long will they last? The Euro system is seeing a very potent hurricane season. And again, this is not a guy and his website and his thoughts, and there's no bias here. Well, there could be some bias kind of baked into some of the data, but it's not personal bias. You understand? It's not, well, I think it's going to be a big hurricane season. No, this is from, come on, people say the King Euro. Trying to give it credibility here so people understand this is not just made up for likes and clicks and fear-mongering. This is the science telling us we need to be more ready than usual. That's the way I look at this. So looking at some of these various pictures, images, if you will, from Phil's tweet, the overall background state, 2 standard deviations, so 200% of normal. That is an ACE of over 200. Wow. All right. Moving on to the next one. This one shows us the amount of hurricanes. You round that number 12.8 up. Call it 13. 13 hurricanes in the Atlantic Basin. Yikes. 23 named storms. And the Pacific, by the way, is down, as is the Westpac. So the Atlantic Basin looks to rule this year and give us a very, very busy season. Overall, a very warm Atlantic and Gulf. the La Nina developing, and really more importantly, it's just no El Nino. And ladies and gentlemen, if you've been watching my videos at least since last December, we've been on top of this. This is what we look at weekly, and it has stayed the same and even edged up a little bit more each time we look at it, that we are headed towards the conditions being there for a very active hurricane season. But this is probability. There is a chance that not much happens at all, of course. And I relate this to sports. You could have a 92% free throw shooter on the line shooting 3 free throws to win the game. They are down 1, whoever this team is, and the guy just has to make 1 to tie it, 2 to win, and he could miss, or she, Caitlin Clark in the WNBA. There's a good example. Very trending name right now, right? She could miss all 3. It's just probability. Now look, this is meteorology, that is sports, but it's the same. It's probability. There is a chance she misses all the free throws or never makes a basket again, but those are extremely low odds. But they're not zero. You ever seen that meme? Something about the, I don't know what I just did there. The odds of being killed by a cow are low but never zero, or something like that. Same thing. The odds that the season ends up being just nothing are not zero, but way more in the line of things being very, very busy. All right? So we just want to make sure we understand that. This is probability. All right? So again, this is a big reason why. This is the May 4th, so it's always a day behind, anomaly chart. Let's drop me out of the picture for a minute, and I'll show you. There's your very warm configuration in the Atlantic Basin, and even the Gulf is starting to warm up now. We'll take a closer look at this in a second. And there's our La Nina trying to develop, and that is right out there in the heart of the Nino 3.4 area. And I knew I pulled up this map. This is off of our interactive map on the HurricaneTrack Insider site. This is what I mean when we talk about these Nino regions. Sorry about my telestrator. Sometimes I think it's my Bluetooth mouse, and it's just glitching. But anyway, these are your Nino regions, and so when I talk about that, this is the Nino, yeah, it is the mouse. This is the Nino 3.4 region right through here, the darker green that I have outlined in the blue color there. We go back over to this graphic, and that is right in that Nino 3.4 area. So the La Nina is coming, and again, the biggest thing is not having an El Nino. And I'll explain why as we move forward. I'll show you some really interesting graphics. Gulf of Mexico warming up, a good chunk of it now, 26 degrees Celsius, or about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly. And that is basically all through here, all of this green, and I'm outlining it in blue. That's 26 Celsius or higher, and that now includes pretty much all the shelf water areas around Florida, at least the western peninsula. We are warming up the Mississippi Sound and vicinity. By the time we get to June 1st, the Gulf of Mexico will be very, very warm. And back to the anomalies, very interesting here that the Gulf is now pretty much 90+% of it at or above the long-term average. It's warmer than average in most of the Gulf. A little bit of area there north of the Yucatan, and just a tiny, tiny little area there north of Cuba. This will ebb and flow over time, but we're starting to warm things up way above normal overall in some areas, not so much in others, but the bottom line, the Gulf is warmer than average. And we are starting to warm things up off the southeast coast. But what is the deal with all of this? Very cold anomalies. I'm going to be honest with you, I do not know. I'm going to reach out to a friend of mine in the business, Michael Lowry. He knows a lot more about some of these things than I do, and I think sharing ideas and collaborating with colleagues is important. Those anomalies are very much on the cold side up here in the North Atlantic, and I find that very intriguing. 4 to 5 degrees Celsius colder than average. That's interesting. And then you've got the subtropics through here, which is colder, bounded by all of this warmth relative to average, concentrated in the tropics. that gives us the signs. We know what to look for, that this will be a very, very busy hurricane season. And there is some suggestion that this look to the sea surface temperature pattern might suggest steering as well, which is what it all comes down to. Where do they end up? And we can see that, when we looked at the anomalies chart of the precipitation, maybe a lot of stuff gets steered to the west this year. All right. Again, those are the actual temperatures in the Gulf. These are the actual temperatures off of the southeast and mid-Atlantic. There is your gradient, your temperature gradient, the difference in temperature over distance, and it is fairly substantial through here because you got all those lines close together, these isotherms. But look, 25, 26 Celsius starting to work its way up. It's only early May. Give it a couple more weeks, and the beaches will be nice and warm, and you can go down and jump in the Atlantic, and it'll be wonderful, unless you're up here in the Northeast or the Gulf of Maine. It's going to be a while, probably July. All right, this is what I wanted to show you. 2005. Did this a few times over the last few months. This is the May edition. This is what the anomalies look like. May 4th, 2005. What happened that year? 28 named storms gave us Katrina, Rita, Wilma, others, right? Big, big, big season. Very destructive, very impactful. That's what the anomalies looked like in 2005. All right, keep that in mind. This is what it looked like in 2010. Now, this is a very similar look to what we have this year. In fact, the sea surface temperatures in 2010 might have been just a smidge warmer than average overall, like beating out 2024. But I think spatially, how large an area we see this year, I'll show you 24 in just a minute. But 2010 is a pretty close match. And of course, as you remember, and this might give us a little glimmer of hope, 2010, no hurricanes made landfall in the United States. Just saying, right? But we only had 19 named storms that year. The models, the overall climate models are suggesting that we will have more than that this year. And in some cases, many more. So not all seasons are the same, but for what it's worth, 2010, very similar to what we see this year so far, and no hurricanes hit the U.S. that year. Will we get lucky? Well, we'll know by November 30th. 2017, highly impactful year, of course. And that's what I'm doing. I'm showing you the big impact years as of late. Well, at least the last 19 years, going back to 2005. What about 2020, 4 years ago? That season gave us 30 named storms, as you might recall, right? And, sorry, my phone was ringing over there, buzzing at me. And that's what the sea surface temperature pattern looked like back in 2020. What about today? There you go. All right? So come on. That's 05. That's now. That's 2010. Close, but I think we're more spread out this year. There's a lot more energy, especially if you look in the Caribbean and the Gulf. Because 2010, there's 2010. We had the cold Gulf overall. We also had the Deepwater Horizon, which didn't have anything to do with sea surface temperatures. I don't think. There was no evidence of that. But 2010 to 2024, there's just more warm water spread across the basin. 2017, not even close. And 2020, we are well ahead of 2020. However, 2020, we were developing that La Nina look, and we're certainly doing that already. So 2024, stout, ready to go. We're developing the La Nina down here. We better be ready, right? Right. I already showed you this. That's the Nino regions. Let's move along. Just to kind of prove my point once again, I love these kinds of graphs. 2023 is where we set the record. That's the orange line. We dipped below that in recent days, but now we're just now back on it. And we'll see if the MDR, the main development region, or actually the North Atlantic as a whole, stays with this, goes up, goes down. But as you can see, since the year began, 2024, we have been above last year. And last year, we had the El Nino competing, and that helped to keep things in check. We still had Idalia, but this year there's no El Nino. It's not going to be there. And look at where we are. So we'll see what happens as we move forward, but we are almost there, ladies and gentlemen, and we had better be ready. All right? What about, how does it look? Well, we're on May 6th, not expecting anything anytime soon. Let's use the yellow up here, whatever this color is. Lots of upper-level winds moving out of the west, dry air, westerly winds in the deep tropics, intertropical convergent zone squashed far to the south. Nothing going on in the Western Caribbean and the Gulf. We wouldn't expect it in early May. Lots of mid-latitude action, and this is what's going to spark the big severe weather outbreak today. Another system here. These storms are just marching across the northern latitudes, and it's just too early. But that does look like it could change in the coming weeks. Looking at long-range guidance and general patterns, maybe the Eastern Pacific, possibly the Western Caribbean, in a couple of weeks starts to get active, which we would expect to see. We shift towards the beginnings of the East Pacific hurricane season and the Atlantic season, mainly in the Western Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico area, sometimes off of the southeast coast. You get these fronts that come down, or a trough goes by, a piece breaks off, energy stays behind, becomes a focusing mechanism. Point is, it's not going to be long now. I don't think it's really that far off into the future. And then we're going to start seeing some things happening. And more than likely, it'll be somewhere in the East Pac or right around here before the month is out. I think it's coming. One way we can look at it and track it is the vorticity signature. Let us use white to make things pop better. Again, this is all of your mid-latitude energy through here. Nothing to, that's nothing. That's all mid-latitude cyclones. We are looking for stuff down here in the tropics, and there's nothing to look at right now. A couple little blobs over here in the East Pac, but that's about it. All right? And looking at the modeling, excuse me, talking too much this morning. Looking at the modeling, this is one of my favorite layers of the atmosphere to tell me what's going on. This is the 5,000 foot level. We call it vorticity. And I look to see if anything, especially down here, is, we got to make it show up there, Mark. Let's use red. If anything down here is bundling together in the tropics. This is a very large area of energy, vorticity, way up in the northern latitudes, right? It's out of the tropics, it's in the subtropics. So let's see, let's move this over time, drop me out, and we'll just go out for 2 weeks. Why not? 6Z GFS, and as you see, down in the deep tropics, nothing. Little pieces of energy coming by, but nothing to speak of. But once we get to about May 16th, 17th, somewhere around there, the GFS trying to drop something in the Eastern Pacific, right on cue with the start of their hurricane season, which officially begins May 15th, and lo and behold, something gets going and moves off to the west, way out in time, nothing to worry about now, but it is a sign that the deterministic models and the ensembles are going to start picking up on stuff, and we'll be watching for that. We don't have anything anytime soon developing in this area, but I do believe there is at least a chance as we get towards the end of the month, and we will look at that in more detail in the coming days. This will probably be this week, and then next Monday we'll have these where they're just weekly, but after Monday I'll do these more frequently. Not necessarily every day yet. That'll start on June 1st as needed. There'll be some periods where I just don't need to do an update because things are dead. We'll get Saharan air outbreaks and just a lull. And then everybody will say, oh, that hurricane season isn't happening that everybody said was coming. Watch, you'll see how that works. But yeah, it's almost time to do these more frequently, and we'll really start watching the MJO, that's the Madden-Julian oscillation, these convectively coupled Kelvin waves, which are like a smaller, more potent window of opportunity for things to develop. And we can track all of that, and I will cite different people that we use on social media to bring that information to you. I don't know everything, never claim that I do, and I like sharing. I like sharing what other people know. I think that's a good thing. We call that cross-pollination. All right? All right, and here's an example, real quick. I don't know who Davis Weather is. I like storms and Buckeye football. There you go, software developer. But I saw this tweet, post, whatever you want to call it, And this is an example. The Ensemble, this is the GEFS, the Ensemble Forecast System. And way out on May 17th, as I showed you on the operational, the deterministic, this is the Ensemble, and it's starting to highlight a little area there in the Southeast Pacific. Also a lowering of pressures perhaps over in the Western Caribbean, and that's what we look for. And we can see this is from the EPS, from the Euro, the Ensemble member, Ensemble prediction system. It is also suggesting a lowering of pressures in the Southeastern Pacific. So these can be our guideposts going forward to look for trouble. And there could be a lot of it in the coming months. Speaking of that, we are always proud to talk about our friends at QuickDam. I'm telling you what, if the stuff I showed you doesn't motivate you, well, I don't know what will. Go to quickdams.com, get you some flood protection. It is fantastic. That's another person we're going to have on, Carol Dancer, the founder and owner and innovator of QuickDams. She's going to come on and talk about flooding and how impactful it is. You know, I've started studying hail more, and that's a separate project. We call it the Hail Project. And it is, I think, you know, look, today is a great example. And rightfully so, the tornado risk is giant. It's going to be very bad. With that, though, they also mention, and it's just kind of lost in there, giant hail. And hail does cause a lot of damage. So with severe weather, I think hail gets sort of left out of the overall conversation of the general public, as does rain and flooding for hurricanes. Yet, flooding is absolutely one of the biggest causes of insured loss, and even uninsured, of course, in our country. And just look at what's happening in Southeast Texas these last few days with a lot of flooding, not even related to tropical cyclones. So you bet they're not just a supporter and a partner. I don't like the word sponsor. They're a partner, and they help us out financially, of course, and it helps what we do and to fund it. But they are also very smart, especially Carol up there, who came up with all of this. 20 years now. QuickDam's been around since 2004. We'll have Carol on to talk about flooding and some of their products and how it can help you, because you need it. We all need it, and it's good to have stuff that can help us out, right? The knowledge and then the tools to mitigate against what might be coming. All right, ECMWF, that's the big one just lately. What's next? NOAA, NOAA, will be dropping, is that what you call it? Like dropping an album? They'll be dropping their big numbers towards the end of the month, I think. I got to look and see when that is. But there'll be lots of press releases. And then again, like I said, later on, we'll get Phil Klotzbach to come in and talk about, well, why does this even matter? What do these numbers do for me? And I like it that people ask those questions. What does this even matter? I love it. Because if you don't ask the questions and you just go with the flow, you're not educating yourself. And the more intelligent we are, you remember G.I. Joe, right? What was it? The knowing is half the battle. Absolutely. All right, from us at HurricaneTrack, we're on Twitter. Subscribe to us, like us, all that good stuff on YouTube. And we are supported not only by QuickDams, but by our hundreds of supporters around the world on Patreon. You can join up at patreon.com/HurricaneTrack, or grab the app and search HurricaneTrack, and you can find us in there and become a part of our community. All right, let me sign off. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack. That's us, our family, our group. I'll talk to you again a week from today.